Georgia, does it have issues? It's college football smothered and covered and locked on SEC.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, thank you for making this your first listen. You can also make it your second listen as long as you listen to Locked On SEC before me. This show brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com for more details. It is a crossover edition. I see my friend Chris Gordy from Locked On SEC right there on the other side of the screen. What's up, Chris? How are you?
What's going on, Barrett? It's crazy to think we've got only 5 more weeks of the regular season already. This season has just flown by.
It is. It is. You know, we were on a college football playoff teleconference yesterday, and I was like, this seems like it's way too early to do this. And then it's like, oh, they're actually releasing the standings or the rankings on Tuesday. But here's the thing. I said this yesterday. It's going fast. And then I think back to when I was in Ireland for Georgia Tech, Florida State. That feels like years ago. So it's a little bit of both. And, you know, I think a lot of this is just because we're new, right? In my mind, it's like we have to sort of wrap our arms around the whole new landscape of the sport because we've never done this before.
Yeah, I saw my guy, Charles Hannegriff, who covers LSU. He wrote an article he posted today that said, hey, LSU fans, your season's not over. We don't have to start looking to next year yet because you took your second loss. And it's kind of funny to think about, but it's like, yeah, any team that has 1 or 2 losses, your season's not over. You're still very much alive in the thick of this thing, whereas in other years you'd be packing it and going, well, I hear the Outback Bowl's nice. I mean, you're still alive. This thing is still a possibility.
The Outback Bowl is nice, though. The bloomin' onion. Coconut shrimp, I'm not the biggest fan of, but bloomin' onion, man, that's my jam. That's my jam. Let's start with a game that is in the state of Florida, a little bit northeast, and that is the world's largest outdoor cocktail party between Florida and Georgia. I've looked at this Georgia team, and I look back to that Texas game, and I think, okay, yeah, the defensive front, awesome. Great job, Georgia. And then it's like, well, damn, Carson Beck threw 3 picks. He's got 8 interceptions over the last 4 games. Yes, Trevor Etienne found the end zone. He really didn't run the ball all that much. And I think we've gotten kind of blinded by the overall dominance against Texas because, to me anyway, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, it's still a flawed Georgia team that really hasn't even shown that it can get over that flaw yet.
Yeah, that's why this game is so fascinating to me because I'm curious. To me, this is a game not even about what Florida does. This is a game about what Georgia does. What does Georgia look like? And I thought, we kind of thought that Texas game, that performance they had, this could be the spring, whatever, skyrocket, whatever the word is, like to make them go, we're going on a tear the rest of the way. And that's what's going to be fascinating this weekend is, do we see that Georgia go, oh, this is the team we were supposed to see preseason, and now they're just going to steamroll everybody? Or do they play back down to their competition and this thing's a field goal game going into the third quarter?
Which has happened a lot. Like Georgia does that a lot this year, which is new.
Yeah. The only thing I'll say, though, Barrett, is when that injury report came out yesterday, and my God, to see the names that Florida is going to be without, they lose Jason Marshall for the season, who was having a great year at DB for them. Trey Wilson's going to be out again. I get it. He hasn't had a monster season, but still an offensive weapon. I mean, their injury report was like, you just ran down and some
Homer's The Odyssey.
Yeah,
like
some
big encyclopedia.
Some big names. And then for Georgia to see Tate Ratledge as probable, like, wait a minute, didn't he just have the tightrope surgery? And I guess enough weeks have passed by that he could be back. So, yeah, I mean, just a few things with Georgia. You mentioned the interceptions has been for Carson Beck. It's been wild that the interception total has been as high as it is. It's been wild that they've still been able to win games with him turning the ball over at that rate. Even the Alabama game, they still had a chance, came back to take a lead and, could have won that one. The run game is really interesting to me. I thought Trevor Etienne was on the way to being a 1,000-yard rusher, 1,200 yards, something like that. And he's 10th in the SEC right now at rushing. It's not bad. It's just, I thought he would be clear-cut top 5, especially when there's no number 2 behind him. Like all the Robinson kids have been injured. Nate Frazier, we've seen in small doses. He's looked really good, but hasn't got a ton of carries. So to me, that's a little shocking. If you told me we're sitting here, almost 3/4 of the way through the season and Georgia hasn't even rushed for 1,000 yards as a team, to me, that one is a little surprising.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think that's what Carson Beck's problem is, right? Because you look back at Georgia, there's always a 1A and 1B, and 1B like James Cook or, whoever, Keith Marshall, they're always right there with 1A, right? Like Sony Michel and Nick Chubb. And I thought that would be Nate Frazier. Like walking out of Mercedes-Benz Stadium in week 1, Nate Frazier was really good in his first ever college game. And I was talking to Jake Rowe that day. And of course, Jake covers Georgia for On 3. He's been on this show before. And he and I both agreed, like, that is the biggest issue this year. It's not Trevor Etienne if he can be a 1A. It's who that 1B is. And I thought it was Nate Frazier. And ultimately, Chris, that is what I think the crux of the inconsistency on Georgia's offense is.
Yeah, it really is. And as far as pass catchers, they've been fine. I mean, Aaron Smith has been good. Dominic Lovett's been good. Dylan Bell, thought maybe Lawson Lucky or one of those guys would step up in the void of Brock Bowers and establish themselves as the next big tight end. Haven't seen that yet, but pass catchers have been fine. I wonder how much is to blame on Mike Bobo. I know a lot of people like to blame him for, when things don't go right.
For the last 2 decades.
Yeah, and he's done it for how many different SEC teams now? So, it kind of is what it is. But to me, it's the larger point is, wow, Georgia's still winning, even without this dominating, suffocating defense that we're used to seeing, right? I mean, it's so funny when you look at defensive leader stats. Georgia's always like top 5 in points allowed, right? Like, but they've given up points this year. They've turned the ball over, and yet here they are still sitting with a chance to make a run. And it's funny, you look at the odds too, like odds to win the SEC or get to Atlanta, they're still the favorite. I mean, it's crazy.
I think that goes to college football in general, but specifically in the SEC, there's not really, and there's no perfect team. We thought it might be Texas, and Texas obviously has some flaws. Well, it's not the flaw I thought. I mean, offensive line was supposed to be a strength. So I don't know what the deal is with there, but Georgia obviously playing in Jacksonville, the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. Yes, we are still saying it and calling it by its proper name on this show. A week off for Florida after what it did to Kentucky, and the score, to me, I don't think it really indicated how much of a blowout that was. Florida dominated that game. And I think a week off with Napier and DJ Lagway together is more important than I think really anything in the SEC this year in terms of where a team goes from here. Because I've said for the last 3 weeks, Billy Napier is coaching his way back into his job. Like I truly believe that if they can just give Georgia or Florida fans hope that DJ Lagway and Billy Napier together can be the future, he's going to keep his job. And this is a big step toward that. If they stay close against Georgia, that is a massive compliment to the direction of this program. Do you agree?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's what I've been telling Florida fans, all throughout the offseason through this season is you fire Napier, Lagway is gone. I mean, absolutely. I know he got the NIL deal, but A&M is a phone call away going, hey, you're from Willis, Texas, right? Right down the road. Yeah, College Station. Certainly Hugh Freeze would take him. I mean, there's a lot of schools that would be calling him. So, I think it's kind of imperative. Now, here's the challenge for Billy Napier. I think we feel pretty good about them finding a way to win at FSU because that is a dumpster fire now. But can you
Which
win?
Might be an insult to dumpster fires.
Right, exactly. Can you win one of the next 4? I understand it's a tough challenge. Versus Georgia, neutral field, at Texas, home for LSU, home for Ole Miss. The home for LSU and home for Ole Miss maybe don't look as daunting as they did a few weeks ago. Ole Miss has been playing down to their competition. LSU's kind of inconsistent, taking the loss at A&M. So maybe they can win one of those with it being at home, but that's the challenge. If they can win one of those and then you beat Florida State, that's 6-6. In my opinion, 6-6 saves your butt. You get to a bowl game. It's hard to fire somebody. So that's the challenge. Now, if they go 5-7, but they were competitive over these next 4 or 5 games, that's something too. I always say, like, what does it look like? What's a 6-6 or 5-7 look like? So, but I'm with you, man. I like DJ Lagway. I met him when he was in high school, and his dad's a good dude. And easy kid to root for, and just a special talent, man. Some of the throws he makes, look, he looks like a freshman at times with some of the decision making, but some of those, some of those throws he makes, you go, oh my God. And so, yeah, look, not having Trey Wilson's going to hurt, but can he keep them in this game? I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, he's that talented.
Yeah, and it's interesting because before the season, we're always like 7-5, 6-6. What keeps his job? By the numbers, and it's like, look, a 6-6 can look different, right? A 6-6 now, we have to recalibrate kind of what we thought of Florida, because a 6-6 where they are right now in the situation with DJ Lagway, that's pretty damn good, man. Like that's pretty damn good, and I think that would bring boosters and decision makers and money in, knowing that, okay, the foundation's there. So I think that'll be interesting to see in the cocktail party this week. Now, obviously, the cocktail party is going to Atlanta and Tampa. I've been of the belief, hey, I don't really like neutral site games, but I like that neutral site game. I understand it has to leave to get that stadium fixed, but what do you think full time? Do you want it to stay in Jacksonville? Do you want it to move around? What's your opinion?
The neutral site games I've never been a huge fan of. You want to go do a one-off in Atlanta to start a season, okay, fine. But like, to me, what makes college football great is the college campuses, is being on campus, having that home atmosphere, all the traditions, the tailgating and all that kind of stuff. But then I talked to Florida and Georgia fans over the years, and they all tell me they love this. They love
the end of summer. It's like the end of summer celebration.
Yeah. So look, I'm not a fan of Florida, Georgia, so I don't get a vote, but they all tell me they love it. And so if they love it, more power to them. To me, I'd rather get the game on campus. I think Kirby even intimated that with that a couple years ago, said like, look, we'd like to bring recruits to our campus and show them our school instead of bringing them to Jacksonville and going, yeah, we play this weird game here once a year. But no, all the fans love it. So it sounds like it's going to be there to stay for years. Although, like you said, they're going to have to take a detour and go play Atlanta and Tampa in 26 and 27.
Yeah, and honestly, though, I think the biggest thing to me is that they allow recruits there, because that wasn't the case, 10 years ago or so, whenever it was in that rule change. So I think that matters a lot, because it is a celebration. And, like the amount of people at Cumberland Island and all of those islands up the Georgia coast and even on the Florida coast, I mean, it's a celebration. And I think that ultimately is part of it. It's a fan experience. Last time I checked, college sports are supposed to be fun.
Can we permanently book Florida Georgia line to play halftime though every year? I think that should be.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of have to, even if you don't like bro country, right? You kind of have to.
Yeah, they kind of need another hit here soon.
And I am, for the record, I'm perfectly fine with bro country, and everybody else is too. You just don't want to admit it. It's like Nickelback. You really do like it. You just don't want to say that you
can't admit it. No.
Oh, come on, Gordy. Come on. We'll take a break. We'll talk about the rest of the SEC. He's Chris Gordy, Locked on SEC. I'm Barrett Sallee. It's a crossover edition of College Football Smothered and Covered and Locked on SEC. Today's show brought to you by our good friends at FanDuel. Tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers, you get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. What a deal, man. You get $150 if you win your first $5 bet. I tell you what, I knew Liberty was going to lose last night. Could have got $150 if you listen to me. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, all of it's right there. Live play-by-play stats, everything right there on the same page in which you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started, like I said, $150 on your first $5 bet as long as you win. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment count with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner, the National Football League. Back with Chris Gordy, and around the SEC, we talked a little bit about LSU, their opponent last week, Chris. Texas A&M, biggest win of the season without a doubt. And I said it's a de facto, lock to get to Atlanta. And folks are like, oh, South Carolina's tougher and Auburn's tougher, and all that's true. But everybody else has tough schedules as well. And so you're sitting there, if you're Texas A&M, you got a head-to-head over a contender, and you might have a bunch of teams with 1 loss or 2 losses, and that head-to-head could come into play a lot of other tiebreakers. First of all, lawyers better have taken care of those tiebreakers because otherwise there's going to be some lawsuits, and billable hours are undefeated. But what did you make of really Marcel Reed coming in, how Texas A&M was able to pressure Garrett Nussmeier? To me, it was one of the most impressive experiences of the year so far in the SEC.
Yeah, I was at the game, and it was kind of interesting. I mean, LSU has the 10-point halftime lead and really felt like it should have been more. And to me, that's the lesson learned from Brian Kelly is you have a chance to put your foot on your opponent's throat in their house on the road. Do it. Settling for field goals in this league is going to get you beat. I mean, you've got when you ask people, what's LSU's strength? It's the offense. So go score points. I mean, 17 points at halftime. They should have had 24. They could have had 30. I mean, had they
could have
some of those drives. And if you're up 30-7 and they put in Marcel Reed in the second half, who cares? You have a big enough lead that you can milk some clock and get away with the win. So, yeah, to me, it was that first interception by Nussmeier. It sets up A&M at the 8. They go in and score. It's now a 1-score game. It was like sharks smelling blood in the water. Kyle Field came alive. The Mo Bamba is pumping in almost every down. LSU's got the ball. You're
every single down.
So yeah, it was a story of don't turn the ball over and don't get stupid. And I think Garrett Nussmeier just kind of got silly and played his worst half of football he's played in an LSU uniform. But I will say, like Marcel Reed, he deserves a lot of credit. But those interceptions that LSU had gave A&M such a short field that he really didn't have to do a whole heck of a lot. They were so keyed in on, keep in mind, A&M had the second best rushing attack in the SEC coming in. Amari Daniels and Le'Veon Moss are real weapons to worry about. So they were so keyed in on them. All Marcel Reed had to do was a little read option and, I'm going to keep it. And, it was all she wrote. So they executed, LSU didn't. And it's a good win, but I will say, like, winning doesn't cure all your problems. Like A&M still has a major problem going in this game. What are they going to do? A quarterback? I mean, you now have a quarterback controversy. People are going, are they going to stick with Reed? Are they going to go back to Wegman? I personally think they're going to probably play both. Maybe they'll start Reed and maybe we'll see some Wegman in here to kind of keep South Carolina off kilter. But I just think with that defensive front that South Carolina has, Kyle Kennard, Dylan Stewart, all those monsters, like they're going to need a quarterback who can move around. And I think that's more Marcel Reed. So we'll see what they end up doing. But to me, this is a crucial game for Mike Elko because as high as they feel right now, undefeated in the SEC, you lose this one and then potentially lose to Texas in the season finale. Suddenly a 9-3 season doesn't feel as great. You know what I mean? Like as we literally 1 minute go from we're going to Atlanta, we're going to go play for an SEC title, we're going to make the playoff, to suddenly you're 9-3 and you're like, man, this doesn't feel as good. And that would be a tremendous accomplishment for Mike Elko in year one, especially from what Jimbo Fisher's been serving him the last few years. But this would be a huge letdown if they lose this game. And I think they're in danger territory, man. Williams-Brice at night, sandstorm pumping. This is actually a pretty good South Carolina team. Could have beat Alabama.
Especially up front on the defensive line. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, they get after it, man. It's no fluke. Kennard, and my God, we get 2 more years of Dylan Stewart. It's gonna be fun to see.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing is we saw the rushing attack for Texas A&M. I'm fascinated to see how that South Carolina defensive front attacks that offensive line because, I mean, we've seen South Carolina's defensive front against the best of the best have no issue, none whatsoever. And like you said, Willie B's tough. I want to talk about that, though, because you mentioned South Carolina and you mentioned Texas. Whether it's Connor Wegman or Marcel Reed, neither of them have played in Jordan-Hare. And 2 years ago, when Carnell Williams took over as the interim head coach, Texas A&M played there, and they had no shot. I don't care what the score said. They had no shot. That, to me, is part of why I think a lot of folks have said that the schedule's still tougher because the two that were on the road are a little harder than we thought. It is going to be fascinating to see because Connor Wegman's had some experience, but not a ton in big games on the road, whether it's him or obviously Marcel Reed doesn't. So it's going to be awesome to see that. But LSU on the other side of the ball, I was very disappointed with how they operated. The offensive line lost some battles. I think that was a big part of why Nussmeier, melted down in the second half. Caden Durham was sort of in and out. You didn't see an awful lot of him. Now LSU is sort of in this sort of purgatory going into the bye week. Do you think that's a one-off last week, or if LSU gets by Alabama next week, you think they have a little more juice to finish this thing off?
I think you're going to see a much more focused LSU team because, one, they're at home, right? I mean, everybody's played so much better at home. And it's crazy, Barrett. Go look at all the big upsets in the SEC. Majority of them have happened with the home team. There's only been one big road win for an SEC team, and that was Georgia winning at Texas. Everybody else in these ranked games, the home team has held serve in so much of these matchups this year. And so I think you're going to get a focused LSU team. It's funny, I was going to say, they couldn't run the football at all against A&M. I was going to say, look, by this point in the season, you're a team that just can't run the football. They've done it a little bit here and there against Arkansas. Then you look at the numbers and go, Bama's third worst against the run in the SEC. Maybe you do want to run the football against Alabama. So I thought Nuss was a little limited. They couldn't run the football for anything, so he's having to throw. C.J. Daniels, his third option, goes down with injury. So now it's Aaron Anderson and Kyron Lacey. A&M's keying in on those two guys. And Chris Hilton, it was his first game back for LSU, and he was rusty, man. I mean, he
have
missed
fun,
time.
Chris. Go do your thing. Let's see what happens.
He had a touchdown in the end zone. He mistimed his jump. He jumped a little too early, didn't connect. And so I was like, man, this is not the game you want to have him making his season debut in. But I think with 2 weeks to prepare, I think LSU is going to be ready. And for Alabama, I think you're going to get the best version of Alabama because they know what's on the line. They know they could still run the table and make the playoff. And so, yeah, it's going to be a real fascinating game. But I don't think – like I said, I think that second half of football for Garrett Nussmeier, I think he's going to wipe the slate clean. I talked to my buddy Sean Salisbury, and he said that's what makes a good quarterback. And obviously his dad being an NFL quarterback, we'll tell him, look, dude, you got to just wipe the slate and come back out ready to play next time. And I think LSU's still very much alive, but again, monster game coming up next week against Bama.
It'll be fun. We'll take a break. More of this crossover edition coming up on the other side. He's Chris Gordy. I'm Barrett Sallee. It's a crossover edition, Locked on SEC and college football smothered and covered. Today's show brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Know that it's become a passionate football fan base isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, and agonizing double overtime wins or losses, which is why they've created the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel, the energy shot made just for super fans like all of us. The fans who are in the first in the parking lot are the last to leave. We see you. 5 Hour Energy sees you. And I'll tell you, I needed some of these. I was bored out of my mind at the Georgia Tech Notre Dame game a couple weeks ago because Notre Dame is the best boring football team I've seen in a very long time. So after the game, went home, took a 5 Hour Energy shot, got me ready for the rest of the day. 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter who your team roots for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for a big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to help you keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with the 5 Hour Energy, available at 5 Hour Energy, shipped nationwide. All right, Chris, I hate talking about the college football playoff because it's way down the road. And honestly, being a national champion is only part of the reason I fell in love with the sport. But like I said, we had this webinar with the playoff committee yesterday, and they started talking about it and going through processes. To me, I'm fascinated to see how the SEC fits in because there are more ACC contenders than I predicted. There, I think, are more Big Ten contenders than I predicted. Who the hell knows with the Big 12? I have no freaking clue what's up with the Big 12. But how do you think this whole are we going to be sitting there on Selection Sunday with a bunch of 2 lost SEC teams throwing our hands in the air thinking, where do we go from here?
It certainly could happen. And it's funny, we kind of thought before the season, 10-2. 10-2. You get 10-2 is the bar. You go 10-2 in the SEC, you get in. Well, I present to you Exhibit A, Missouri. They
Right.
are in a position where they have 4 winnable games to finish off their season. If they go 10-2, I think we're going to look at them and go, do they really deserve to get in? Like, what's their best win? Surviving Vandy in overtime? Maybe Boston College? Like,
Right.
So that's where I think resumes matter. And, much like the NCAA or the selection committee for college basketball, like, I think you got to look at resumes and go, maybe we value a good loss over a bunch of mediocre wins. Now, they didn't do that last year. Michigan played a terrible non-conference. They played ECU and Bowling Green, and the committee said, we don't give a damn. Michigan's undefeated. We're putting them in. And yet they dinged Florida State because, resume or whatever. We know it was because the quarterback was hurt. But, they're still going to do whatever they want. And so that's where I wonder, do they give some of these SEC teams the benefit of the doubt where, we know Georgia and Bama, just because of their dominance, they're going to get the benefit of the doubt. So if there's any question on both of them, if Bama's sitting there 10-2, Bama's getting in. They're going to look at the logo on the side of the helmet. Same thing with Georgia. A&M, do they get the benefit of the doubt? I think Texas might.
I think A&M would get it.
Yeah, we'll see. Again, maybe those two, the two big wins.
Well, and Notre Dame might be a big issue with Texas A&M.
Yep. I just think I still go back to Barrett. They should have, if we're talking about the 12 best teams, the playoff committee does rankings. The rankings they do at the end, 1 through 25. Why don't you just take 1 through 12? This whole crap about if you win your conference, you automatically move to the front of the line. They don't do this in the college basketball tournament. They don't go, well, you won the ACC tournament, so you're 1 seed. No, that doesn't happen in college basketball. They don't just move you to the front of the line. That's what we're doing in football. We're going, even if you had 3 losses, but you won the Big 12, we're going to move you to the front of the line. It's just, to me, it doesn't, I get we're trying to be fair to all these conferences, but I just think if you took 1 through 12 and there happened to be 5 SEC teams in the top 12, so be it. That's how it came out. But again, I guess it's not about getting the 12 best teams. It's about getting, giving everybody a seat at the table, and if Boise State runs the table, they get in, and all this kind of stuff. So we'll see how it plays out. But I had somebody ask me yesterday, how many SEC teams get in. I said, I think 3 is guaranteed. I think 4 is kind of probably the level. 5, I think, is pushing it, and we'll see what happens at season's end.
Yeah, I think 3 is more likely than 5, but 4 is probably the number, and auto bids are stupid. But it's election season. I've conceded the election in terms of this ridiculous format. I lose, other people win. Not you, because you're kind of on my side. It's just, this whole thing is so dumb. It's ridiculous. But, hey, we are here. Everybody wanted it. Rich Clark, who is the college football playoff executive director who replaced Bill Hancock, was on this webinar. And dude, this guy's in way over his head. He has no idea what he's doing. And, we got into the discussion because it was a lot of people who are old school reporters on this call, or, people who have been around for a while. And we're asking real questions. He had no idea the answers. And he was like, well, we're taking the best teams, but not the most deserving. Okay, well, you need to define that, bro.
That's okay. It's always the trap we fall into is is it the best? Because I always said, every year, even Bama with 2 losses, you go, they're still one of the best teams on paper.
And last year, this is the thing last year too. Florida State was ranked higher than Georgia. Alabama got in. Florida State was number 5. Georgia was number 6. And I'm thinking, okay, if we're ranking the best, Alabama's better than Florida State, but Georgia isn't? What planet are we living on right now? This is so dumb. It is Halloween. Tom Luganville and I on Sirius XM, we always have a gateway question for callers to answer before they're allowed to get on the air. Last 2 weeks, best Halloween or best horror movie and best Halloween candy. I can't let you go until you answer those 2 questions.
Yeah, to me, it's hard to beat the original Halloween. It still stands up today.
Like it.
In fact, we were in LA 2 years ago, and we found the neighborhood where they filmed, where Michael's standing in front of the bushes and stuff.
Really?
And it's funny because it's this is supposed to be Illinois, Haddonfield, but it's literally a neighborhood in Los Angeles. So that one, my wife, she says the original Exorcist. I still can't watch that late at night.
That is terrifying, man. I don't like it.
There's some evil stuff going on with that movie. Best candy, I don't know. Kit Kat is probably my go-to.
Kit Kat's good. I like it.
Nothing too Nerds I can do a little, but man,
the little boxes of Nerds, the little tiny ones.
The sugar rush is just too much with some of that stuff.
The Reese's peanut butter cups that have the Reese's pieces inside the Reese's peanut butter cups, put it in the freezer. That's my jam. That is the greatest invention of all time. I like comedy, horror movies. And so Scream and I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, and I Know What You Did Last Summer, those are kind of comedy. And then the real parody Scary Movie is one of the funniest movies I've ever seen.
Yeah, original Scream, I'll never forget seeing in the theater. And I mean, the place was literally going nuts because of that movie.
It was a big deal. I remember too. I remember like we had a whole group. I was in high school. We had a whole group. Like we have to go see this together. And like a lot of the girls were like, I can't do this anymore. And they just walked out.
Yep.
I can't do it.
We're old. We're old. There's some kids watching this right now going, what is Scream?
I don't like, yeah. Like I got the Scream mask for my kids and they're like, what the hell is that? I'm like, okay, we can't do this anymore. Like, I feel like I've had, I'm a decent parent and like had them like go back to my era and understand some things, but the Scream mask is iconic, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll never tell you. When I was 12, I went, for Halloween, I dressed as OJ Simpson. I had an OJ Simpson mask. And, at the time it was cool, but yeah, 2024 probably couldn't do that anymore.
No, that would not work. That would 100% not work. But anyway, all right, Chris, it's been fun. Crossover edition, Locked On SEC and college football smothered and covered. Go make Locked On SEC either your first or second listen. You can make this your first or second listen either, but no one else, just us two. Then you can go to the rest of the Locked On network. But us two first. Chris, talk to you soon, buddy. Happy Halloween.
You too, Barrett. Thanks, man.